All right, I know this take is going to send some atheists into orbit, but let's try to keep the pitchforks in the shed for a moment and look at what the evidence tells us. We can't let modern biases, whether religious or anti-religious, get in the way of understanding how political systems evolve. And like it or not, theocratic systems dominated global politics for well over a millennium, starting with a guy named Constantine. Before Constantine, Rome was an absolute bloodbath. Civil war after civil war, emperors rose and fell like reality show contestants. The average Roman emperor didn't exactly enjoy a long, peaceful retirement. Violent deaths, assassinations, mutinies, poisonings were more common than natural ones. Ruling Rome was like sitting on a throne made of daggers. Then comes Constantine. Not only did he reign for over 37 years, but his dynasty held power for 57 years, an eternity by Roman standards. And here's the kicker. The dynasty only ends with Julian the Apostate, who wasn't Christian. After that, every emperor is a Christian. Coincidence? Not likely. So what changed? For starters, Christianity at the time wasn't the fast track to fame and fortune it became centuries later. Back then, being Christian meant living by a demanding ethical framework. You didn't become a Christian for clout, you became one because you were genuinely drawn to the moral code. That made for loyal followers, soldiers, administrators and advisors who believed in something beyond personal gain. That belief that shared ethical core gave Constantine something the old emperors never had: deep-rooted loyalty. His system didn't just run on fear or coin, it ran on conviction, and people noticed. Arab, Chinese and Indian writers of the time were fascinated by this new kind of political system. The loyalty of Christian followers made a real impression. Some of those civilizations went on to tweak their systems into more theocratic structures, and not just for spiritual reasons, but for practical governance. And guess what? Theocracies won for a long time. They outlasted the fractured classical systems with all their palace coups and power grabs. Why? Because conviction, when aligned with leadership, creates a serious advantage. Think about it. Would you rather rule with many backstabbing careerists, or people who believe helping you is helping God? This theocratic edge carried well into the Middle Ages. Appearing in the Islamic caliphates, the Ming dynasty's Confucian-Buddhist synthesis, and Catholic monarchies like Spain and France. These weren't backward theocracies holding off progress, they were the dominant global players for centuries. So what happened? Secular technocracies happened. The rise of systems rooted in scientific method, administrative complexity and meritocratic institutions eventually outpaced the slower-moving theocracies. But make no mistake, that was a long, drawn-out process that didn't start gaining traction until after the Renaissance. In short, theocracy wasn't some regressive fluke in world history. It was, for a time, a superior system to the chaotic classical empires it replaced. Constantine wasn't just lucky. He understood the power of shared belief, and whether or not you buy into the theology, the politics of it were brilliant. So before we declare every religious political system inherently flawed, we should remember that they were the reason some empires lasted longer, ruled better, and outperformed the alternatives, until they didn't. Now, before we pat ourselves on the back for living in the age of secular technocracies, science-driven, bureaucratically efficient and supposedly rational, we've got to be honest with ourselves. These systems aren't perfect either. Like every empire before them, they decayed. They grow bloated, disconnected, and often lose sight of the people they're supposed to serve. Just look around. The United States, arguably the poster child for the modern secular technocratic state, isn't immune. We're already seeing cracks, institutional distrust, growing inequality, leadership that's more performative than principled, and a creeping inability to solve real problems. Rome followed the same pattern before Constantine stepped in with smartphones and a 24-hour news cycle. So, if we want to keep this whole system alive and working, we must stop pretending it's untouchable. It's not bulletproof, and acting like it is speeds up the breakdown. We've got to be willing to look at it with clear eyes, call out the cracks as they happen, and stop unthinkingly defending every part of it like it's sacred. And here's the uncomfortable question. What's the cultural rot creeping in and dragging some technocracies into decline? Could it be the same kind of social nihilism, let's call it Diogenes Disease, that quietly hollowed out Rome, Persia, China and every other civilization once they got too comfortable, too detached or too clever for their good? We've got to study that, seriously. Because if we don't, history doesn't just rhyme, it loops. And when secular technocracies start losing the plot, something else always shows up to fill the vacuum. That something? It's usually a theocracy. Not necessarily the old-school kind with incense and robes, but the new kind, polished, modern, rebranded. The kind that promises a return to order and moral clarity in a world spinning out of control. So here's the real question. What does that offer the average person that today's neoliberal technocracy doesn't? And maybe even more importantly, should our secular systems take a page from the theocrats' playbook? Should we build stronger ethical frameworks, perhaps even introduce some filter for leadership, not just based on money or charisma, but on actual public virtue? Can we do that without dragging in the toxic baggage, witch hunts, censorship, or the Luddite fear of progress? At the end of the day, the choice we face isn't perfect system versus broken system. It's honest upkeep versus wishful collapse. Our model might be better than what came before, but only if we're willing to fix it before it breaks.